Okay, we're continuing over here in the Orchos Yosher, Rav Chaim Kanievsky, in the section over here about Torah and learning Torah. We learned the beautiful words of the Rambam yesterday. Today he says like this. Today he writes, someone who wants to become a Torah scholar. Now remember, we're taking everything on our level. That means that every single person in their own right has an opportunity to become their own Talmud Chacham. Whether you're going to know all of Shas on your fingertips, or you know all of Mishnayos Baal Peh by heart, or you'll know every single psak of the Mishnah Berurah, the Chavetz Chaim. So that might not be for us. But in some area in Torah, everybody could accomplish something that will put them on a higher level than they're on. So he writes like this, that anybody that wants to become a Talmud Chacham, Amiti, a real one, he must be very persistent and diligent in his studies. And he has to learn ba'asmada with a tremendous amount of continuity, consistency. It is known by yeshivas in the yeshivas, not the most intelligent boys in the yeshiva, in general, are not the ones that are the most successful. Ella masmidim, rather those that are diligent in their studies are the ones that succeed. The difference between someone who's very intelligent, a genius, and someone that is not, someone who's not so bright, his mind is not so sharp. He has to learn a little bit extra. Even an hour extra, he has to learn the same thing. But after the fact, the person who has the quick brain and the person who is a little bit slower to grasp and understand, they're on even footing over here, they're holding in the same place. So says Rav Chaim Kanievsky, if you're not a genius and you're not born a genius, there are many stories that are told about Rav Chaim himself that he wasn't a genius, but he was extremely diligent in his studies. And he worked and he worked and he worked and he worked over and over and over and over again. So a person will be able to accomplish in their learning as well. Now you don't have 12 hours a day to be masmidim to learn, but you have an hour a day. And if a person takes that 1 hour a day of learning and they make it count, which means that they take their phone and they put it off to the side, and they say for 1 hour, I'm just going to sit, I'm going to learn. For that shiur, I'm going to sit, I'm going to learn. For whatever class you're going to, I'm going to sit, I'm going to learn. Bahasmada, with diligence and with persistence. So then it will begin to get easier and easier. Even Yevamos will begin to get easier and easier, believe it or not, for all of us, Be'ez Hashem, as you'll see in his words over here. But every person could be they could acquire a certain area of learning. The Gemara tells us in Chagiga that Eino Deimi, you cannot compare the person who learns through Shas 100 times to the person who learns through it 101 times. The 101 time, as the Meforshim explain over there, shows the tremendous avah, the tremendous love that a person has for the Torah, because 100 times you would say, look, I already learned 100 times, I don't have to do it anymore. For who knows it better than me? So the 101 times shows the tremendous love that a person has. Most of us are not going to learn through Shas 101 times. But I had a friend in yeshiva who saw this chazal and he said, what am I going to learn through all of Shas 101 times? He says, but at least one daf in all of Shas, I have to follow the words of chazal and learn it 101 times. So he picked a daf, I think it was in Ksuvis, and he kept track and he went through it 1, 5, 10, 20, 50, 80, 90, and he made a siyum when he got to 101 times. So that was his connection to these words of chazal. So therefore, as we see, that in any way that a person could, we'll try to connect ourselves to the world of hasmada, of the diligence. And then he says over the following. Even someone who has mashed potatoes between his ears, he doesn't think very well at all. If you will be consistent and diligent, Chazal promised already, Shiatzliach, he will succeed. As long as he has the fear of heaven upon him. Like it says in Masechta Megillah, which we learned, Yagati v'loi matzasi. If a person says, I worked hard but I couldn't understand. I didn't find wisdom. I didn't understand the Torah. Al Tamin, you're not allowed to believe him. Because if a person works really hard, with tremendous diligence, for sure they're going to succeed. And then he brings down from his father, the disciple, the following story. This story also came up in the Haggadah that we learned from Rav Chaim Kanievsky. I don't know that we said it over in this year. But he brings down a famous story from the Chassam Sofer, that there was once a young man who was 17 years old who came to apply to the prestigious yeshiva of Preshburg by the Chassam Sofer, which was one of the most elite yeshivas in the world at the time. And every boy that was there, they were already Talmidei Chachamim by the time they got there. They just became bigger Talmidei Chachamim. So the young man came to the yeshiva, and he sat down for a test with the Chassam Sofer. And he said, so tell me, young man, which Gemara are you learning that I should test you on? So the boy said, he's 17 years old, coming to the most prestigious yeshiva. He said, I never learned Gemara before. He said, okay. He said, how about Mishnah? What Mishnah do you know? And the boy said, I never learned Mishnah before. Okay. So Gemara you don't know, Mishnah you don't know. How about a pasuk in the Chumash? Could you tell me one verse in the Chumash that we can speak about this? So the boy looked at the Chassam Sofer with tremendous innocence and he said, I never learned a verse in the Chumash. So the Chassam Sofer looked at this young man with pity and he said, look, you're 17 years old. He says, you're coming to try out for the most prestigious yeshiva in Europe right now. All of the young men your age, they're on much higher levels than you are. He said, there's no way that I could accept you to our yeshiva. I want to give you a piece of advice. The Gemara says that Shemana Asrei L'chuppah, at 18 years old, a young man should get married. So you're 17, go and get married when you're 18 years old. Raise your children, and your children will be on the derech of learning, and you'll send your children to learn by me. And that way you'll have a shaykhus, you'll have a connection to our yeshiva. So the young man looks at the Chassam Sofer and he lets out a cry and he says, Rabbi, I don't want that only my children should learn from you. I want to learn Torah from you. Chassam Sofer saw how badly this boy wanted to learn. He said, okay, you're accepted to my yeshiva. And he went around to the Bachim in the yeshiva and said, listen, this boy doesn't know anything, but he wants to learn, we're going to teach him. And he made Chavrusa Shavs, he made Chavrusas, study partners for this boy throughout the day. And as the Steipler brings down, it was very difficult for him to understand and learn. Once that he did, he forgot everything like that. So he would learn with one guy for a couple hours. At the end of the time, they say, you understand? Yes, he learned it. Then he would go to learn with the next person, he forgot everything. And it went on like this for months. Till the Bachim came to the Chassam Sofer and they began complaining, we're wasting our time. He said, if there's a boy that wants to learn and he's trying, you're not wasting your time, you'll see. Many years later, the Chassam Sofer, the way that the Steipler brings down the Maisa is that he kept working Meshech Hazman over a long period of time. Hitzliach gam v'asa peri. He ended up being successful and he saw tremendous fruits of his labor. V'nase Talmid Chacham Gadol, he became a great scholar. V'rav be'ir gedolah, he became the Rav of a very big city. V'nizkar harbe pa'amim b'tshuvas Chassam Sofer, and the Chassam Sofer mentions him by name many times in his responsa, his halachic responsa. Ayin Sham, take a look over there. So therefore says the Steipler, it doesn't come easy. Okay, who said it's supposed to come easy? But if you try, and you try, and you try, and you try, it will get easier. And we'll finish with these words. Ube'emes, in truth. The most difficult part of learning is when you start, when you embark. But once you get accustomed to the learning, and you begin to enjoy it, even though there will be challenges throughout, that's known. There's no way you could avoid the challenges. Nevertheless, the main difficulty that you have with the learning, which is understanding and being able to get into it and stay consistent, it will begin to dissipate and disappear, and you'll get into it. And anyone who's still in the Daf Yomi Shir, you'll think about it from when we started off. Nobody ever dreamed that there would be so many people 2.5 years later that are still learning Daf Yomi. We got together in that side room the first time and we were like looking and laughing at each other. Come on, who's really going to stick around over here? And it was not easy. And it was day after day and COVID and in the house and locked up and locked down and everything. But you stayed with it. Why? Because in the beginning it's difficult. In the beginning it's hard. Yevomis is hard as well. Don't let go. But the Kaishi is Yored, as he writes, eventually begins to disappear and it gets easier and easier. So as we said before, whether we're going to become the biggest Talmidei Chachamim in the world or not, that's not our ASIC, that's not our job. Our job is to take something from these words of Rav Chaim Kanievsky and apply them to our lives. If it means making sure that you learn every single day X amount of time, Bahasmada, maybe it's only 5 minutes Bahasmada a person can handle. 5 minutes where they don't do anything else besides learn. They put down the phone, they put in the other room, and they just learn. Whatever it's going to be, everybody can become a Talmid Chacham, or at least have a shaykhis, a connection to being a scholar in their own way. Okay, we'll continue Bez Hashem next week.